Hello and welcome to Geetika Ki Canadian Diary. Today we are going to explore a remarkable story of migration, resilience, family, and belonging. If, like me, you missed the opportunity to watch the 7-minute awesome film featured in the City of Toronto's Migrant Stories exhibition a few weeks back, do not worry, because together we'll take a deep dive into this important chapter of history and travel back to June 22nd, 1948, when the HMT Empire Windrush arrived at Tilbury Docks in England, an event that transformed the lives of thousands and left lasting impact on Britain and beyond. I'm joined by Toronto based media producer and storyteller, and a long-time friend from Queen's Park good old days, Wendy Vincent, whose own family is part of this remarkable legacy. Wendy, it's a pleasure to have you with me today.
Geetika, my friend, this is, an amazing conversation, my friend. Thank you for acknowledging me, and thank you for having an opportunity for us to have a conversation together. This is really, really great. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks to you for bringing stories together and letting other people in. I say it's a potluck here, right?
Yeah,
Everybody from different parts coming with their own stories and journeys, and we need to capture it. So it will be maybe a pilot for other communities here, other ethnicities here in Canada. Thank you for doing
yeah.
that. So, for listeners who may be hearing about the Windrush generation for the first time, what is Windrush Day, and what first inspired your own involvement with this?
Sure. Thank you so much. So I wanted to clarify one piece. Migrant Stories was actually on display back in 2023.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah,
Thanks for correcting me.
no problem, no problem. The event that I had most recently in Canada, at least, was Windrush in Conversation
Ah,
at
yes.
Blackhurst Cultural
Yes, you're
Center.
right. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Apologies for
Um,
that.
no problem, no problem at all. So what inspired me? I
Mhm.
will tell you that um, when my dad passed away, um, reflecting on being his daughter and our family, I always recall him mentioning to me growing up as a kiddo, are you going to come to England ever with me? Why don't we go on vacation to England? And there was this constant narrative that I was unfortunately never attuned to what he was really saying to me. And when he passed away, I was like, oh, now wait a minute. My dad traveled to England during the Windrush generation. He met my mom, they got married, they had my brother, and then came away to Canada. And he was a part of a generation of 500,000 people, as young men and women, as kids, as people who made that journey. And the Canadians, when they came away, it was almost like a fracture from that. But that whole idea of Windrush started with, as you mentioned, that first ship that landed in 1948 and those first 1,000 passengers and how they opened up a movement of migration that reset the world, right? And reset specifically England, who was devastated from the war. And the Windrush generation answered a very specific call to help rebuild the quote unquote mother country, as it was called at the time, from the devastation of World War II. And that was on the strength of Caribbean soldiers who had served in the RAF. So there's all of this precedent, and there's all this movement, and there's all of this legacy. And when Windrush Day 2023 came up, I had been having these conversations with my uncle, Lloyd Lindo. And not only had we been talking, but I had recorded our conversations. And in those hours and hours of conversation, there was the Windrush story from the Canadian perspective. Went to CBC Radio, and that set off 6 hours, sorry, 6 segments for CBC Radio's national syndication service about Windrush Day from a Canadian context. And it was, that's now become the exhibition on the strength of Uncle Lloyd's content. He's 99 years young, and he has a personal, prolific, lived experience with Windrush because he was there as a young man from 1954 until 1964. And again, years where he became a trained welder, worked at London Airport before it became Heathrow. He married. These are all defining years for these individuals, but defining years equally for England.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So, what are some of the most important contributions of Windrush generation from your Uncle Lloyd's perspective? And when you heard all of the conversations with him and when you were reflecting, according to you as well, that has made to our Canadian society and that you feel are still underappreciated?
Absolutely. Thank you. One of the things that I always say is that the Windrush story is not complete in England without the Canadians. And
Absolutely.
here in Canada, the Windrush story is generally underknown.
Mhm.
So we're talking about people who moved from the Caribbean to England and became professionally accredited across a number of professions, whether as my dad, an electrician, Uncle Lloyd as a welder, the nurses were NHS trained and then came to Canada and worked, whether it be breaking racial barriers in like Owen Sound or Sick Kids Hospital. This is a formidable, formidable group who have, underknown, contributed massively to Canadian society.
Such a huge thank you to all of them. And some of those experiences, those struggles, those challenges, I feel like even um, people who keep coming and bringing their talent to this country, they are also kind of feeling the same thing sometimes. I always wonder that if 20 years back when I came, or somebody who's coming 2 years back, but even now, when they enter a grocery store, that's the first thing, right? As an immigrant, you are doing to interact with other members of the community here. I feel like when you enter that space, the feeling is generally the same. It's a new place. How am I going to mingle here? How am I going to adjust? The fears and kind of excitement, we kind of all share that together, even now. Um,
Amen.
yeah. Um, so the Windrush stories often, I feel like in your articles and whatever I could catch on this topic online, it's described as one of resilience. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, what does that word mean to you personally?
Mm. I can't imagine landing somewhere as a new citizen and imagine walking around looking for housing,
Hmm.
and in rooming houses there would be signage that said no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. That was just standard practice, right?
Yep.
So the amount and the level of like personal like I think about my parents meeting that as people who were much younger than me, and it breaks my heart to think that they would have to experience that. But that was common practice. You know, Johnny Rotten, the lead singer of the Sex Pistols, he actually, of Irish extraction, wrote, that's the name of his first ever biography. No blacks, no dogs, no Irish. Think about the intersectional, generational impact of that and having to overcome that for lodging, what it would have been like to look for work. The ecosystems would have to be so intentional and
Yeah,
sophisticated to help people overcome that. And
yeah,
my that's what my parents have handed down to me. Amazing.
yeah. It's an amazing story of how they made through those times. And again, I'm going to say something that I'm not sure how. It's not anybody's. I'm not trying to criticize any system here or anything, but sometimes it takes generations and decades and a long time to change people's perspectives on
Mhm.
things that have been told or they've experienced. And I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to share my own personal story, Wendy. Sometimes I totally get what you're saying, that it leaves lasting impressions on that particular community sometimes. And that's very hard to come out of. Gets
Yeah,
very hard.
yeah.
Um, as an immigrant, this story has nothing to do with the struggles that Caribbean community must have felt when
Mhm,
they were here. My mother was doctorate in sitar back home as an
mhm,
immigrant when she came, and we were looking for a family doctor.
mhm,
And she asked her name to be listed in the doctor's notes as well. That's what she wasn't thinking about how the reaction would be. Doctors were,
mhm,
and
mhm,
the doctor reprimanded her saying you cannot say that because only medical doctors can say doctor. But she was proud to be a new immigrant and say that, oh, I earned a PhD in my subject, and right? It broke her heart, and it was so bad that as a new immigrant the first week, and then you feel like, oh my god, where have I landed here, right? Or
mhm,
to be told by a university professor that, you know what, I struggled so much to get to where I am. You came with a PhD degree and you think you're going to become a professor or a teacher or a part-time or a guest speaker for your subject here for my students. Forget about it. You need to go back to where things are at the very bottom. So these are the things when you sometimes hear and you have to go through it, you feel like, really? Uh, so I get a little bit of what some communities have to go through. And
mhm,
it is, I'm hoping the world is learning and growing and getting wiser and being more
mhm.
inclusive. That's what we all want to do.
Yeah,
Um, but having said so, I think the struggles sometimes continue every day, and we all need to take a pause and think how, when we talk about inclusiveness and equity, are we really showing individually, like how are we participating? Not to say, oh, I'm going to throw it on the policymakers now, or say, oh, you did not do it. How are we as individuals bringing it together every single day? How are we acting? So these are good stories for us to hear and ponder upon.
those anecdotes are really powerful, and they're just as impactful with respect to change and
Mhm.
incremental change and like systemic. They absolutely are. And I just want to acknowledge your mother's experience, right?
Yeah,
And yeah, that's those are sentient moments. Absolutely.
I totally agree with you. You've dedicated now so much time to preserving this history. Thank
Mm,
you. I'm getting
yeah.
goosebumps and I'm going to get emotional. Um,
Um,
why is it important for younger generations to continue learning about the Windrush legacy here in Canada?
Absolutely. There's sort of a few streams by way of Caribbean migration into Canada. There is the domestic workers scheme. There are people who came directly as things opened up during Pearson and Trudeau. And then there is Windrush. Now, that's not exclusively the case, but those are these sort of three main areas of Caribbean movement in Canada that, because our knowledge keepers are people who, like my Uncle Lloyd, are 99 years old, 99 years young, right? Capturing
Yeah.
that data is so important because there's a Marcus Garvey adjacent quote that keeps coming up in this work, and other people who are completely disconnected from each other have been coming back to me with it. And it's along the lines of, until you know where you're from, you're not going to know where you're going. And, embedding Windrush histories into the larger context
Yeah.
of Canadian histories, it's a matter of urgency because our knowledge keepers, our elders or our ancestors, have different levels of like mental capacity. These are prolific stories that have
Absolutely.
impacted us generationally. And so yes, knowing these stories is it's it's almost like a matter of urgency, being able to capture the stories.
I totally, totally agree with you.
Mhm.
Before we wrap up, how can our listeners support your work or learn more about the history and legacy of the Windrush generation?
Thank you, thank you. So I have basically the equivalent of a traveling museum, by way of the curatorial content that was on display through the City of Toronto, History Museums for Migrant Stories. So I can share those stories by way of one-offs, and I'm building Windrush Canada. So I'm looking at opportunities to capture more stories and having the means to do so. But yeah, I will happily bring Uncle Lloyd's prolific Canadian Windrush expat story to any school. I've got precedent for a different range of thought leadership experiences to share more.
Thank you so much for doing this, Wendy. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity to share with your amazing community. Your Canadian Diary is, yeah, this is why we do what we do and why we speak to each other. It's
Right?
so
Yeah.
important, Geetika, and I have to acknowledge you for what you're doing. This is a really amazing platform. Kudos to you.
Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate it. It's just solopreneur, one person show, trying to let everybody know, let's get together, let's hear
Yeah,
each other and share our stories. It's so fun. We
yeah,
are an amazing multicultural Canadian community here, and we sometimes miss in our struggles of everyday life to integrate into the system. We actually forget we have so much of each other together, and
yes.
we can do so much better.
So true. Better together.
Better together. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have a lovely day. Thank you so much, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye.